We're now a couple of weeks into the provincial election campaigns, and like everyone else, students have their issues, but they haven't necessarily been promoted so much. Recently, there was a story done for the Aquinian where students outlined their main issues as rent, prices, grocery costs, as well as the cost of tuition. Today I'm joined by David Coon, leader of the Green Party here in New Brunswick. He is running in the Fredericton-Lincoln riding, which consists of both the campuses of UNB and St. Thomas. Welcome, David. Can you just talk a little bit about how the Green Party outlines those issues, specifically in terms of cost of rent?
Sure. So on rent, we would bring in a permanent rent cap, and it would be on the unit so that it's not just on the tenant, the current tenant. So when they move out, the cap still applies to that apartment, so that the next tenant who moves in has a capped rent as well. So there's no opportunity then to jack the rent up when someone leaves, and it removes the motivation to kind of rent evict people in order to open and to increase the rents significantly if the building changes hands. So we've been seeing a lot of that when buildings are purchased, particularly from companies from out of town or people from out of town or out of the province. They want to get a higher rent, so they come up with some way of essentially legally evicting the people and then jack the rent up as new people come in. So the rent cap is number one, absolutely. And actually, I brought a bill, two different bills to the Legislative Assembly, and as an opposition leader, to create a rent cap. One of them was a bigger bill that had a lot of other protections for tenants that aren't currently in the law. We looked around across the province with help of some STU students, actually, because we have social work interns doing their action placements every year. And so one year they were helping to work on tenancy issues. And so they did this big look across the country about what other Tenancies Acts look like, what kind of protections they provide to tenants, and we built that all into a piece of legislation, a bill. It got defeated. Second bill was more focused just on the rent cap alone, without the other things, and it got defeated. And the reason opposition bills get defeated is because, unlike some legislative assemblies in the Parliament of Canada, House of Commons, government members, whether they're liberal or conservative, are whipped, so they're not allowed to vote differently than their leader wants them to vote. So it's hard to get a bill through if you're on the opposition benches, unless you can find an ally inside the government's cabinet who will then champion the bill inside the cabinet to build support for you to get it. And I've done this successfully a couple of times, but recently with the rebellion inside the Elaine Higgs's cabinet, that wasn't possible. I was actually working with a couple of cabinet ministers on the government side to move forward another bill, not related to rent caps, but they were part of the rebellion, and so then they were gone. So that wasn't that didn't go well in the end for the bill. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, and so what other policies are the Green Party looking to implement, or at least fight for, that would be particularly important for students?
Well, just to finish up on rents, one of the things we want to see is a requirement for landlords to make available the data on heating costs, because particularly for international students, they budgeted for the rent maybe, and as it is, and don't realize that, in the months of December, January, February, and they're paying as much in heating as they do in rent sometimes. So that's if that was required to be advertised when you're advertising a rental unit, that this is the average heating cost as well as this is what the rent is, well, then you could plan better, and it might drive landlords and property owners to actually invest in upgrading their insulation and windows, for example, to competitively get their heating costs down. So there's that. With respect to the cost of tuition, if we were the government, and even if we're not, and we as we always do in opposition, press to get the elements of our election platform adopted, we would want to raise the threshold for the tuition bursaries, so that it basically cover the cost of tuition from a family household income of 70,000 to 100,000, so more students would essentially have free tuition. Because our long-term goal in the Green Party is to eliminate the cost of tuition. Our view is that post-secondary education shouldn't cost just like public education doesn't cost. So we want to get to that point where post-secondary education doesn't cost. So by raising the threshold from $70,000 to $100,000 from a household income perspective, that essentially would create, through bursaries, free rent, free tenancies, free tuition. Let's get out of the rent, free tuition. So that's another important one. On groceries, that's really difficult. One of the things that's so interesting on groceries now is the costs are somewhat being driven by the consequences of climate breakdown. Because of the tremendous droughts and also flooding that's happening in many of the food growing areas that we import much of our food from, that's driving up the cost of food. So our focus on food really is to become more self-sufficient in food in our region, in the Maritimes, and support greater production of food and processing of food in the province for our region. But in the short term, it's a difficult thing to, what do you do about the cost of food? I mean, support or encourage the development of more small-scale grocers, like I think of recently Victory Meat Market just opened up a new small grocery store in Lincoln, and their prices, for example, are lower than the regular large grocery stores, supermarkets. Same thing with the co-op, and the co-op is not easy for students to get to, but maybe there's a way to, connect the two, because the co-op obviously is not a business of generating profits for investors, because it's a cooperative. The members of the co-op essentially own the grocery store, and so the prices aren't driven by the profit motive, so their prices are more affordable as well.
Yeah, and what other things are the Green Party going to fight for, or at least campaign for, when it comes to student interest? Is there anything else that stands out to you?
Well, it depends how, I guess, you describe student interest. Mm-hmm. But with respect to sort of the future for students as younger people, we're very focused on the climate crisis and what we need to be doing to reduce our carbon footprint as a province, as a community, and what we need to be doing to protect people against the severe consequences of climate breakdown, in terms of the heat waves and the violent storms and intense rainfalls and flooding and those kinds of impacts. So we've got in our platform, for example, a significant number of measures around that, very concrete measures to address both the energy transition to renewables, to get our energy demand down through efficiency and conservation, and get our need for private vehicles down through public transportation. So all of that would help make it more affordable for transportation and reduce the carbon footprint. And with respect to the cost of transportation, we would be providing support for the cities with transit systems like Fredericton towards their operating costs, which they get none right now, to ensure, to make it possible for them to offer more regular service, more frequent service, better routes, which, unlike many other provinces that provide funding for city transit systems, we never have. And we regard transit and public transportation as a public service, just like sewage system or the drinking water system or the road system. And we need to start funding and treating public transportation in the same way. It's a public service, it needs to be properly funded, and it hasn't been, so we would.
Yeah, and what are those issues that you just kind of talked about would you outline as the biggest priority for the Green Party?
Well, of those issues, I mean, the sort of the biggest priority overall right now in this election is fixing the healthcare system. because our healthcare system is crumbling, and without healthcare, both for people's physical health and for their mental health, we're in serious trouble, and we're already seeing it now with people not being able to access mental health care in a timely fashion, not being able to access emergency health care in a timely fashion, not being able to even access primary health care because they don't have a nurse practitioner or a doctor, and there's no easy way to get around that. So for everyone concerned, our number one priority is to fix the healthcare system and ensure that we eliminate wait lists for access to primary health care. We eliminate the madness that's going on in our ERs and eliminate the surgery wait times, or at least reduce them to a normal level. And so those are huge priorities. And that's the number one for this election overall.
Yeah, and to kind of bounce off that a little bit, nursing as well as teaching are two fields that tend to struggle a little bit in New Brunswick. What can a provincial government do to ensure that these fields continue to strengthen over time?
Well, with respect to both of them, we need to make sure we're providing equivalent salary and benefits and bonuses as our neighboring provinces of Nova Scotia and PEI. There should be no light between what you can earn as a teacher or nurse here in New Brunswick versus Nova Scotia or PEI. We have similar economies, similar shared cultures, and we shouldn't be at a disadvantage as we are right now, because both of those jurisdictions pay better, have better benefits, have better bonuses, and as a result, we've been losing particularly nurses. The other thing is the working conditions for nurses and teachers have been deteriorating quite badly, and they're leaving the bedside, they're leaving the classroom, and that needs to be reversed. That's partly because they're working shorthanded. They don't have this, enough colleagues to do the work that needs to be done, and that goes back to the income as well as the nature of the job they have. The other piece of this is nurses and teachers need to have permanent job offers for permanent work, not contracts that are term-based, but some guarantee that this is going to be their career and they can count on it. That they'll get the full benefits of and so on. So we just need to ensure that kind of equivalence across the entire region, and that would keep many more teachers and nurses working in the province.
Yeah. Policies and statements that have been made by current Premier Blaine Higgs, as well as the flyers that were recently sent out through the mail, those tend to make students feel a little bit threatened or uncomfortable in certain scenarios. What scares you about the current direction in New Brunswick when it comes to inclusion?
Well, Mr. Higgs has been creating problems where they didn't exist. And instead of being a problem solver, he's been a problem creator, which is dividing people. He's been vilifying all kinds of groups of people. And members of the LGBTQ community are caught up in that. Certainly the way he has attacked Policy 713 in the Department of Education and spoken about trans and queer students is very damaging. And it's been, at the same time, the way he's spoken about teachers in that context, very disrespectful and damaging. No wonder more and more teachers want to leave. So that's a huge problem. And then you've got this vile literature that's being distributed in everyone's mailboxes that is targeting trans and queer youth as well as teachers themselves in the system. So it's a bad time, and it is totally at the feet of the current Premier who has brought this about. With Policy 713, there were no complaints of substance prior to him deciding that it was a problem. And so now we have the situation where what he's been doing has increased bullying in the public school system against queer and trans kids, and made them, and not just them in the public school system, but members of the queer and trans communities also feeling very vulnerable because his whole narrative has been to other people and treat them as something less.
And what kind of things are the Green Party looking to bring to promote that inclusivity in the community?
Well, it starts with respect for everyone, and so that's key. I mean, across the board, he has just respected so many different peoples and people, it's unbelievable. So it starts with respect, and practically speaking, the school system, it means, fixing the problems he created with Policy 713. That's pretty straightforward. The Child and Youth Advocate made some good recommendations when he reviewed it in depth and looked across the country, and so we would look at those recommendations and incorporate some of those into the return to the original objectives of Policy 713. So that's our very concrete measure. But really, we need to have a premier who is going to be respectful and embracing and affirming everyone in our province, no matter who they love, no matter what they look like, what their faith is, what their origins are, and that's not what we've been seeing.
Yeah, and just as a final note, many students have been active through the election process, whether that's through promoting voting or other means, but others may not vote on October 21st because they might not find it to be important or they might not see the impact of it. What do you say as a final message in regards to that towards students?
Well, voting is important because, of course, it determines who is going to be making decisions in the province on behalf of the common good, on behalf of the public interest, on behalf of students. And so it's important to cast your ballot for who you, in your heart and in your head, believe would do the best job. And the opportunities are easy for voting because there's going to be a ballot box right here at STU for people to cast their vote. They can cast their vote for where they live, for the candidates where they live right now, going to university, or they can cast their vote for the candidates back in their home community if they're from New Brunswick. And they can do that right here. So it's going to be made easy. It's vital to do so, but I think it's important to remember that democracy doesn't stop with casting a ballot. If it does, democracy is going to crash on the rocks. It's important to be informed about the issues and participate in discussions, debates, attend rallies around issues you're concerned about, and so on. In between elections, get involved. That's critical. So it's important. Our democracy is a little bit vulnerable these days, and students can make a huge difference to strengthening our democracy by not just voting, which is important, but also being informed and engaged. We had at my legislative office 3 social work students a couple years back who were doing their sort of practicum there, and they said on social action, and they said, you know what, a lot of our friends don't know how the system really works. So I thought, great, let's do some videos. Well, they actually proposed videos. They said, what if we did some videos to describe how it works? So we teamed them up with a UMB student who had a flair for making films, animated films, and they created 3 videos called Leducate Yourself. And they're great. They really spell it out, why it's important, how the process all works. And it's kind of humorous at times. It's not partisan in any way. It's not a Green Party partisan video. It's about why democracy is important, how it works in New Brunswick and Canada, and how you participate in it. So they're still available on YouTube. Leducate Yourself.
Great. And any other final messages or thoughts that you would like to say to students?
I just know how busy students are with all of the work they have for their classes, for their courses. I know many students also work at a part-time job at the same time to try and make ends meet. And life is very busy and complicated during university years, and I know that. So one of the things I would say is inform yourself, and don't just rely on your feed online, but seek out good sources of information. The Guardian newspaper online, for example, internationally, or the Globe and Mail in Canada, CBC, what have you, and inform yourself. So that's a great way to do it, and keep your head up. Don't let all the work you have to do bury you. Get out there, take a break, walk in Odell Park, walk in Reading Park, and just look at the trees, take some deep breaths, and get back at it.
All right, well, thank you, David, for your time. We really appreciate it. And just as a reminder to everyone to go vote in the election. It's on October 21st. There will be polls here on Stu campus. And thank you again for your time.